Welcome back to the Sabre Production video series where we're going to explore some of the new features of Sabre Production. So in this video, we're going to explore the available to produce page. So the goals of this video are going to be how do you set locations that are going to be considered when looking at available inventory? What do the color codes mean? Yellow, green, red. Reviewing availability. Again, what does that mean per location? What does that mean based on the remaining quantity of the component line versus gross demand in its entirety? And reviewing routing information. So the first area that we're going to explore are setting locations to be considered when looking at the available to produce page. So if we open up Business Central, the first thing that we'll do is we'll navigate to the out of the box locations page that Business Central natively has. So again, this is just a list of the locations that have been set up within the company. So I'm going to drill into the blue location here. Really simple setup on this page. Users would just scroll down and they'd be able to see that there's a new fast tab created called Sabre Production. So if the available to produce page should consider on-hand inventory in the location that you're on, you will enable or turn on this Boolean. If you have it turned off, that means that any on-hand quantity that you have in this location will not be considered. So a really good example of that would be that a lot of people will have a quality or QA location. So that is where they'll move inventory to that's been checked and maybe isn't good for production or they're not quite sure yet. So in the quality location, you may choose to have this available to produce Boolean turned off. Whereas in a main warehouse, or in this case, the blue warehouse, where that inventory has been evaluated and I do know it's good, I will choose to have that turned on. So this makes sure that when I'm thinking about my on-hand quantities, I'm thinking not only about is it on hand, but is it something that I could use when I'm considering whether or not I need to change some of my firm planned production orders to release to work on the shop floor. So the next area we're going to review is the color coding. What does it mean when I look at the available to produce page and I see a line that's green, yellow, or red? So again, we talked a little bit about the locations, but green means that the total gross demand for this item across all of its production orders and across Business Central is still less than the on hand that you have. So there's no issue covering not only this production order, but all orders in the system. Yellow means that the total demand across all of the orders for this item is greater than what you have on hand. However, you have enough on hand to cover the remaining quantity of the production order component line that you're looking at. So as an example, if I had 100 pieces on hand, I needed 80 pieces for a production order, but I needed 200 pieces for all of the demand. The system is saying, you've got enough to cover some of your orders, but you don't have enough to cover every single order. Lastly, what we have here is red. As you can imagine, red looks at the production order remaining quantity. It looks at your on hand, and you do not have enough on hand to cover that specific order. So now what we're going to do is we'll jump into Business Central and we'll review the availability so that we're able to see how this color coding affects our available to produce page. So again, I'm going to open up Business Central. So I've got the production orders available to produce pinned to my roll center, but of course I could always search the available to produce page. And if it weren't pinned to my roll center, I could always bookmark it there. So here I'm able to see both firm planned and released production orders. I could set page filters if I wanted. So if, for example, I only wanted to focus on released orders or firm planned orders, I could set my page filters. I could filter by anything on the production order line. So maybe I want to look at dates specifically, which is very common. If I wanted to look at just specific production order components or even routing information. So you could go ahead and filter if you needed to. If changes are happening ongoing and you want to validate that you're dealing with the most up-to-date numbers, you can always use the refresh icon. So by clicking that, it's going to go and validate your on-hand quantities in the locations, which again might be handy if you are, you know that there's a lot of transactions that are happening ongoing and you're trying to make decisions as to whether or not you want to release to the shop floor. First, we're going to just look at one of the production orders that we have here. So here I can see that I need to produce an item. It's still in firm planned. I can already see red, and the reason that I see it being red is because of the components, I do have some that are unavailable. So when I think about the availability of the components for this production order, I can see that I still need to procure some of the material. But here we can just take a look at the color coding and analyze what that means. So for the front wheel, I can see that I've got a quantity per of 1. On the production order component line, my remaining quantity is 1. I can see that I have on hand 100 of these front wheels, and I can see across all of my demand in Business Central, I have this in demand 13 times, or I need 13 pieces of the 100. So the line is green because my net available quantity after the fact is 87. So not only do I have enough to cover the front wheel for this specific order, but I can actually cover all the demand in Business Central for the item. For the back wheel, we can see that it's possibly available. So what that means is it's saying for this specific order where your remaining quantity is 1, you have 15 on hand. So you can cover this order. However, your total demand for the back wheel across all your orders is 28. So you're actually going to be short 13 pieces to cover everything. So you'll need to decide which orders get the back wheel based on what you have until you get more either items produced or more purchase orders come in and increase your on hand. And then as you can imagine, for the red, that shows that I've got a remaining quantity here, but my total on hand is 0. So I don't have enough to cover not only all of the demand in my system, but I don't have enough to cover even this specific order. So it starts to color code based on the availability. And again, this is looking at which location's inventory it should consider. And then you'll see that your overall production order status color codes based on the worst case scenario of the component. So down below here where we see we've got this as being green, that's because every single component, we have enough to cover it. And that could be because your remaining quantity is 0 or because you've got enough on hand to cover what's remaining. You may look at some of your orders and say, well, this front wheel and back wheel chain assembly, I'll say I'm okay right now, but what if I consume everything that's on the shop floor? Because as you can see here, I've got some orders here that are in the release status. They haven't yet been fully consumed, so I don't maybe always want to consider that on hand when I'm thinking about looking at releasing more to the floor. So you can choose to net out released components. So by turning this on and clicking on refresh, it's now going to recalculate the lines, and it looks at the production orders that are in the release status that still have a consumption quantity on them, and it's going to consider them like they have been consumed. So we now see that this back wheel is unavailable because if I finish all of the production orders that are currently in the release status, I'm not going to have enough left over. So this tells me that I probably don't want to release more to the shop floor that include the back wheel until I get, like I said, more purchase orders come in, or if it's something that's a sub-assembly, more production orders output. As often people need to, you can go ahead and print information to send it to Excel or to send it to PDF for the shop floor. Again, you can see the ability here to be able to print, set filters, refresh. If you needed to, you can drill directly into the production order to make a change. So for example, you might look at this and say, well, you know what, I could substitute this back wheel for another back wheel, drill into the production order, substitute the component, and maybe that helps your availability situation. So within this screen, you're able to make updates and changes. You can also filter. You can release to the shop floor by using the change status function. So if I wanted to, this firm planned, if I had had enough inventory, I could have changed the status to release directly from this page as well. Last area we're going to explore is reviewing routing information. So we've given a really simple capability within the available to produce page to not only look at material availability, but look at the capacity that we have on the routings of the production order. Back in the available to produce page. So now I'm going to change my view from being components to routing. So now I can see for the production orders that were listed, rather than seeing their bill of material components, I can see the work and machine centers that have been associated to the production order. So you would be able to see the setup time, the run time, and the wait time. This does not color code. The color coding is just towards the material availability, but it just gives you a bit of a sense of which machines are going to be required, what's the setup and runtime that's going to be required. And then again, users have the ability, if they like, to open in Excel or print to Excel different versions. And users have often used this to create little dispatch reports to be able to see, well, what days am I going to need, the wheel assembly or final assembly. So this page is really more of just the ability to be able to see which work centers and machine centers you're going to need for the components, but the color coding aspect of it is associated to the bill of material component. Thanks again for joining me. If you have any questions or want to learn more about Sabre production, please feel free to contact us using the information below.